The legal fight moved to the courthouse, and every forged email, every loosened post became evidence against them. The courtroom is different than television makes it look. It's quieter, like a concert hall before the orchestra starts. Everyone's posture is a kind of armor. Paper shuffles sound louder than before. When the case moved from the pasture to the courthouse, every draft email, every altered survey, every recorded conversation had to be laid out in a way a jury could follow. The stakes. Not only accountability for Karen and her collaborators, but the protection of property rights that people rely on across communities. Karen Whitfield pleaded not guilty. Her attorneys argued technicalities, prosecutorial overreach, and the ordinary things defense lawyers do. But when Sarah Chen methodically presented the documents, the original 2019 development agreement excluding my ranch, my grandfather's handwritten notes, the forged 2021 covenant extension, and the misspelled email trail, the house of cards began to wobble in front of a jury. Robert Kumar took the stand and explained in professional terms what forgery of a survey could do to an engineer's license and to the market. Bill Hendricks testified about the wooden posts that had been moved and how the markers had been intentionally recited. Jennifer Walsh, under immunity, walked through the email archive that showed Karen orchestrating the narrative, pressuring others to create false minutes and fabricate approvals. Forensics pulled deleted files from Karen's laptop. Planning, spreadsheets, and research into adverse possession and auction rules months before my father passed. It suggested planning, not happenstance. When I took the stand, Sarah had me tell what most mattered in the human testimony. The simple, brutal image of returning from my father's funeral to find strangers walking my property like they owned it. The weight of losing your family's history for a piece of paper someone forged in a cramped office. I spoke about the cedar post my grandfather had set, the horses Emma had learned to ride, the way the land told you who you'd been. Cross-examination attempted to make me look like a stubborn holdout, a man out of step with progress. It tried to frame my resistance as backward-looking. But when I described finding the post deliberately loosened and the way the auction sign had been planted, the jury felt what I felt in my bones. It was not just me on trial. It was the integrity of the process those papers were supposed to protect. The original developer came in as a witness. He described negotiating with my grandfather and the explicit clause excluding working agricultural properties from HOA governance. He also testified to receiving an inquiry from Karen months before the forged extension, asking about legal ways to incorporate adjacent properties. The timing was damning. After 3 weeks of testimony and careful demonstration of how the fraud had been executed, the jury needed less than a day to deliberate. The verdicts came back guilty on multiple counts: conspiracy, wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted property theft. Karen did not appear shocked. She was expressionless as the clerk read each count. Yet inside the courtroom, the air shifted. The law, slow and blunt as it is, had found purchase. Sentencing was severe. Judge Mendoza used words that rang in my head for weeks: an assault on property rights and community trust. The prosecution asked for the maximum, citing premeditation, scale, and a number of victims involved. The court sentenced Karen to 25 years in federal custody with no parole. There were restitutions to be sorted, civil suits to be resolved, and a long tail of legal housekeeping that followed. Civil actions moved in parallel. Sarah Chen filed a civil suit against the HOA as an entity, Karen's company, an individual. Board members who had direct involvement. The damages sought were not merely the value of the ranch, but punitive damages for emotional distress, attorney's fees, and the cost of restoring trust. From the pressure, the HOA fractured. Patricia Vance was elected to lead a reformed board, their first acts being transparency and due process measures. Covenants were rewritten to ensure clear notice, independent verification requirements for surveys, and strict limits on unilateral enforcement. The community pledged to test any enforcement action through independent review first. The emotional aftermath is harder to describe than any courtroom drama. There is relief, a clean sense that justice was served, but it is mixed with an exhaustion of months of high alert living. There are still nights when I wake and walk the fence line, checking posts as though they might have moved again. There are quiet evenings when Emma brings me the wooden plaque she made in shop and asks me what I think of law school. There are still interviews she avoids. She prefers to use her words in a courtroom someday. 1 year after the dust settled, the ranch feels like a place reclaimed. Cattle graze where they always have. Cedar posts glint in the morning sun. The ugly auction sign is gone, replaced with an honest handcrafted marker Emma made in woodworking class. Morrison Ranch, estimate 1958, not for sale. The Maplewood Heights HOA was rebuilt with new bylaws and accountability. People who were terrified before now join meetings openly and ask questions that would have once been brushed aside. Property values rose, in part because the stain of fraud was scrubbed clean by public scrutiny. There were consequences for many. Karen's real estate license was revoked. Several board members faced civil liability. Insurance paid to cover some settlements, but the cost to reputations was not. Something currency could fix. What we all learned is that power without transparency becomes an instrument of theft. They tried to sell what my family sweat and bled for. And they failed. The land stayed. If this series inspired one change you could make in your community's governance, what would it be? Drop one concrete change in the comments. I read every reply.